Welcome to the DMF. I'm Justin Younts. This is part two.
When
Go
you've
ahead.
got
Yeah.
like that spec script, like that can work, but I think it needs to work if it's coming from in-house of the studio.
Yes.
If they're gonna do, if
Yeah.
they're gonna cover everything, and it's gonna be this thing, like you said, if you're coming to them to pitch that, you're just coming with the spec script, and
Yeah.
that's all we've got is a script. But piggybacking off of what we've just talked about, one of the things that I've noticed is I want to ask you this: how would you improve the industry from a budget standpoint? Because we look at films like Godzilla Minus One, which was made for, I believe, like 110 million, and then you got like Fantastic Four, which is made for like 200 million. Then you add in the advertising, that's another 200 million. But it doesn't really look better than Godzilla like Minus One. Why is it that this movie made in Japan is able to cut costs lower than we are here? Do you have an answer for that, or is that?
To be honest with you, over here, I think we need to be.
Hmm.
It's a frame of mind that we gotta watch out for or look at because we have the resources are out there, and I really believe if you look at a film, you create the budget, you do it diligently. You're not just like making up stuff. Like you go through the line by line, and if it legitimately is going to cost $100 million to make this film, and you could back it up, that's just what it costs to make the film, right?
Hmm.
The resources are out there, so so for me, I want to look at it more like, especially for us as we're going into our future slate of films, it's more about the quality and what you're putting out there, right?
Yeah.
And are you telling a good story? Are you putting a good product out there? In North America, it's interesting because obviously our rates are high. New York, Chicago, very expensive cities to shoot in. You have tax credit funding and stuff like that. But when you go out to Asia right now, they're trying to change the landscape. There's countries out there that are essentially telling productions, hey, come shoot in our country and we will give you 40% of your budget up front, not after you're done. We'll give it to you up front. There's a lot of incentives over there where industries in certain countries are getting subsidized, and I know we get the finger pointed at us here in Canada too because we kind of
Yeah.
like perfected that system. That's why all the American productions are here. It's cheaper for them to make a film here than it is in the States.
Why
Um,
is that? Is it just there's just too much red tape to get through? Is it just like, why have they not noticed that this is what these countries are doing? Why aren't we trying the same thing?
so if you look at Canada, there's a cohesive body put together of different organizations that work together.
Hmm.
When you look at the states, there's no one like I know you have like the unions like SAG, right?
Yeah.
But over here you have various agencies, financing, government, unions. They all work together
Interesting.
to advance like the industry here, right? Collectively, they may argue with each other, they may bicker, but they do work together, right?
Yeah.
Um, and in the States, you don't have that. There's like no one unifying body. It's pretty much every state's on their own doing their own thing.
That's a
Uh,
very good point.
you don't really have the federal support there either. So it's kind of like every state for themselves, right? And whatever they're going to do is what they're going to do. And it could be better than what we do here or worse. I know Georgia essentially, I think, cloned what we're doing here and made it work for them. I know they were very strategic. They had a long-term plan. It's been interesting to see them execute that and bring it to pass. But for the most part, Georgia does whatever they're doing with no federal assistance or anything like that, or cohesiveness with any of the other states. They're just doing their own thing. just like New Mexico, just like Texas, just like California. And I think in that mindset, it's kind of where some of the setbacks are coming in.
Mm.
Versus these other countries in Asia or even here in Canada, right? If there was ever like a unifying force
Yeah.
in the States, yeah, I think you'd get everything back, right?
That's interesting. I really I love going back to like the budgets and how they're kind of becoming bloated. What do you think is causing these budgets to become this bloated? Is it just too many people on staff? Do you think they're not? I don't know. We none of us know because we can't really look at the books. But
Yeah,
what is your
it
guess?
it so it is a little bit hard to say without looking at the production, right? And yes, there's obviously productions where budgets are bloated, and you wonder how could that be. But to be honest with you, if you look at filmmaking, especially the past few years, with just how much the cost of money has increased, right?
Yeah,
A dollar is not a dollar anymore from what it was pre-pandemic. It's probably $2 or maybe three by now, right?
yeah,
So the cost of everything has gone up. Okay, a lot of the equipment and technology may have come down a bit,
mm,
but rates, actor rates, union rates, all of that stuff, it's all like,
so
it's human
related to
capital.
inflation.
Yeah, it's human capital you're really paying for, right?
Yeah,
And I know that's why the AI stuff is scary, because obviously it's something I don't think it's going to take away. I think it's gonna help the industry overall. But
mm,
I understand why people are a little bit afraid, because it's like, oh, well, we're going to lose human capital because of this thing, right?
yeah.
Um, so if you want to look at why it's more expensive, let's say in the States than it is in other countries,
No,
uh,
no, I would add to
yeah,
that because I mean they're filming in they're filming in Georgia, they're filming in the volume screen. I mean they're cutting costs wherever they're, but for some reason there's still just these bloated budgets and like they don't even end up being great films either. That's why I used Godzilla Minus One as an example, as this film that came out of nowhere. But you look at the special effects, you look at what they're doing, it looks like a better put together film. And here we are here putting all this money into it. Example of that is like a Thor: Love and Thunder. You look at that; it was a 200 million. And the reason I bring up the bloated budget is because they cost so much now. If they don't make that money, like if they don't make almost $1 billion, it's almost seen as a loss. Is
yeah,
there is, that's kind of where I'm coming from. But I like
yeah.
what you're saying that the other countries are giving them the
Yeah, that question, it's so loaded too, because again, you factor in hyperinflation, you factor in just the cost here alone. Sometimes, and you don't know. It's interesting to look at the numbers after the fact, because you don't know. For example, like a Disney and Marvel,
yeah,
they book these releases. Oh, we have this film coming out on July 26, 2026, and all of a sudden they're getting close to the release date. The movie's not finished. So
yeah,
they're putting pressure on VFX companies, the overtime, but now everybody's working overtime, and the numbers are going crazy, and you know what I mean? So there's so many factors. So I'm careful with that one
yeah,
in terms of, and I know people wonder, well, how did that cost $100 million to make, or
yeah,
200 million to make? And then it's like, there's a lot more to it than
yeah,
maybe just straight production costs. You don't know how many days went into overtime. You don't, the union dues and fees and fringe benefits and this, it just keeps compounding and compounding, right?
right,
That's why a lot of the American productions look outside. um, oh, hey, we have our currency. If we exchange the rate, for example, in Canada, it takes us a little bit further. But at the same time, we can also get these tax credits, and it could help discount the production by 30% or whatever. And
yeah,
so they're factoring all these different ways to try to, I think, keep the budgets down. But let's just, be honest, like, it's just human capital, manpower, it costs, right? It's not it's not cheap, and rightfully so, right?
And you brought up a very good point. It's like, the release date is coming and the movie isn't finished and they're like trying to rush the film into production. Do you think it would be better to just, as you said at the beginning, be patient and just maybe move the release date up, or or put it,
You you
uh,
would think
go ahead,
so, but
I'm sorry.
then with some of those big companies, it ends up costing them more money.
Yeah, I know.
It's just it's a kind of a dirty dog cycle,
Yeah.
and they're trying to forecast their returns and trying to schedule certain dates so the other
Yeah.
guys don't get their times in the theater, and all these things, and they got to
Yeah.
structure marketing and promotion that happens way before that, because a lot of that's built on like when the film's being released. So
Yeah.
there's just so many
Well,
factors, and
with Marvel used to have like they didn't present it like that, but it's basically their corporate marketing plan of like, this is phase one, this is phase two, this is where we're going and everything. And like, if you said, if it, they push it back, then it pushes it into this movie. And it's like, or this movie hasn't come out yet, so this thing doesn't, like, they're all supposed to like kind of work together as this like cogs in a machine. But anyways, I love what you said. Moving away from, because I want to talk a little bit about something that you've talked about in other podcasts, which is going outside the system. Talk a little bit about that, because you were going to do a Netflix type service, and that you decided against that. Where Talk a little bit
yeah.
about that.
So you see, maybe that's a little bit of the rebellion in me from growing up in the States, but I still have it there. And yeah, so the main thing you'll see, like for example, in Canada versus the States, for example, there is like a system here. There is a structure that does support a lot of filmmakers and people in that field, but it is a system and it is a structure. And as with all system, there's an entry point, there's a process you go through, and more processes.
Yeah.
After a while, essentially you get to hopefully where it is you're trying to go, right? And it's the same in the UK as well. Um, but for our last project, and I think just for our overall vision, it's something that had to operate outside the system. Um, just because you can look within the system, there might be certain narratives they want to promote, or certain types of things they want to do. So if whatever you're doing doesn't fit into that context, you're immediately outside the circle, right?
Mm,
So a film like EFC didn't really fit the context um, uh, of maybe what the system was looking for at the time, right? So
yeah.
I knew we were going to have no support for that, which is fine, because for us, we have a completely different plan in and of ourselves. So everything we did essentially just kind of just did on our own accord, and almost did it the opposite of the way everybody does here, right?
Yeah.
Um, I'm trying to say it without getting all these technical little like
No,
details.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
But from one of the things I listened to, you were talking about how you had this Netflix type service, but you decided that like it would have been that these guys are going to galvanize each. They're going to go after
Yes.
each other, and you were like, let's just step back.
Yes. Yeah. So when I first started exploring the film industry, and I had the opportunity through networks and people I knew just to be able to get on a lot of sets, I looked at the entire process. I looked to see how filmmaking was done first, and then I looked outside of it, and I said, "Oh, okay." The biggest problem here that maybe I wasn't even looking at the big studios, because they typically have distribution built in
Yeah.
before anything happens. But when you look at the independent space, because at the time I'm looking around the world, there's all these great indie films coming out of like Europe. When you go to these film festivals, all these interesting art house films, there's so much stuff that was like out there that maybe isn't really accessible by wider audiences, right? And so I said, well, the biggest hole I could see here in that independent world space is distribution. And back then in 2010, 2009, I'm like, this is such a great opportunity, because Netflix literally built their house on independent films, distributing DVDs in the mail. I was one of those guys that ordered from them, right? But they did literally build their house on independent films, like these odd films you'd see from Sweden or something, right? But now all of a sudden, I remember it was an era where Google Video was online and YouTube was just surfacing. And then I remember when Google purchased YouTube, that was like, boom, this is it. This is the future right now. We're obviously moving in a direction where watching movies, content, streaming stuff online is going to be like it. So I said, this method of distribution could potentially have a very wide reach in terms of audience. I know there's going to be issues, but I thought independent filmmakers would have more of the opportunity because they wouldn't be restricted by territories and rights. They could have an online platform and reach a global market. And the only thing is, back then there was no infrastructure for that, and so we had focused a lot on creating the tech that could compress files to the point where you could just watch a half HD movie without it buffering too much, and you can actually get through it on, like, I think a lot of people were still even using dial-up back then, right? And so we went through the process to develop this, and we did as best as we could. It got to the point where you could clearly see the investment that was needed.
Yeah.
Even if we had all the money in the world, it wouldn't have been enough, because you needed the entirety of everything to upgrade. You needed faster, like, the DSL type service, internet service that people were starting to move into, right?
Yeah.
You needed the high speed stuff, and just the infrastructure was not there at the time.
Okay.
But the big guys were investing in it. Google, Amazon, you name it, Oracle, they were investing into the hard infrastructure with unlimited resources. The Netflixes, we're starting to also see the vision too, as well, and it was very clear that there was going to be a mad rush for this space, right?
Yeah.
And back then we always said, well, come about 2021, that'd be right about the right time, 10 years, give or take or so.
So we're talking 2011.
2000, yeah, 10, 11, so right around 2021, probably that's where it's just going to go boom. And a lot of people are going to get like weeded out along the way. There'll be maybe a few big platforms that everybody's using, because it's impossible to have 20 platforms where
And
you're
that's-
paying,
And that's kind of that's exactly what has happened. Is they've
Yeah.
kind of, we're seeing them all kind of just like eat each other up. Did you ever
Yeah.
think about going to them and like partnering with like a Netflix? Well, Netflix, I think, was like the first one to do like the kind of what the on-demand service that we all now know from like Hulu and Disney Plus. But like, I think Netflix was like really the first one that really like brought that convenience to it. Did you ever think about going to one of them and introducing some of your ideas to it, or did you kind of want to be independent from a Netflix or even a Google? Say?
So I do feel as though I always wanted to be independent, but I'll tell you a very interesting story, because back then, to test we wanted to test out some things, so we made a short film, and but mostly, really, what we wanted to do with this short film was build an event around it
Mhm.
and stream the event live, and just
Yeah.
to see how live with these codexes that we built, would they work doing a live stream, and can they handle the traffic,
Yeah.
and can we get through something like this? So we ran this big experiment where we made this short. It was, I think, 2010. We were out in Vancouver at the time, and we streamed it online, like the event around it. Obviously, it was early days. We wanted to target a very specific group, like the college age kind of group of people, because they were the ones online watching YouTube and Google Video.
Yeah.
And so we tried it. Uh, for all intents and purposes, even though the entirety of the thing crashed, it was a success because it was just, there was so many people like trying to see it that the entire thing crashed, right?
How long did it take for it to crash?
I remember it was something after the first 10 minutes. It
That's what I
couldn't,
thought.
so it was a
Yeah.
success in the degree there was so much interest that
Yeah.
crashed the site. Uh, you know,
That's good. So that's
uh,
good. So you saw the
uh,
interest, but yeah.
we and but people, but I was contacted after that back then, by a few studios, and I was brought in, and one of the questions, which I was completely not prepared for, and I was asked a few questions. They asked me. They said, "Well, this is very interesting what you're trying to do. So, what do you think, like in the future?" Because they asked me very specific questions. They said, "What do you think in the future if you have a film that has $100 million production budget, 30%, 20, 30% P&A? What do you think that would do online? Like, what kind of returns you see that with?" And then the next questions were like, how do you handle digital rights management? And how do you, and it was a string of questions that I was completely not
Oh
prepared
man.
for. Right. And I had no idea
This reminds
how
me of
to
the
really
Social
respond
Network
to that. Yeah.
when he's brought into the board or whatever after crashing their server or whatever, and they're like, tell us how to, what's gonna, yeah, what are our returns
Yeah.
gonna be on this?" It's like, well, we don't really know yet because we can only estimate because
Yeah.
this is just one system. But
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah.
that's great that they
Yeah.
trusted you enough to ask you something
I,
there because they saw that you saw the future.
I didn't have the answers, but the one thing I did realize in some of those meetings that I had never taken into account was the one thing that kept coming up was digital rights management. How do you solve for the,
Yeah.
who has what rights and piracy and this? That was the major, I think, hesitation from anybody doing anything back then. Obviously, nowadays Netflix has like really locked their stuff. All the platforms have everything really locked down in a really good way. There's still piracy out there, of course,
Yeah.
but I mean, I think eventually we're going to get to the point where there's no reason to pirate any content, um,
Hopefully,
because
I
yeah,
think the problem, the reason piracy still kind of exists is because there's still things out there that they just haven't released. Like you have like Star Wars, you have people still want to watch the unaltered versions, not the version that they released in '96, where they changed the stuff. So I think that's one of the reasons why piracy still kind of exists because there's things that like either rights fees they can't get it, or things of that nature. That's kind of where I've seen like piracy kind of going out. I just watched a video with somebody talking about how this movie's on Netflix. And the only way to watch it is on Netflix. Like they didn't do a Blu-ray release of that, but there's a piracy
yeah.
of that. So I think that one of the reasons is they're not really meeting that demand, but can they meet that demand because of the rights fees? So I think that's one of I would read the comments there, and a lot of people would say, "Well, if it's out there, I'll buy it. But if it's not out there, then I'm gonna go for the piracy rate because there's no
Yeah.
option to get it." So I think that that's an I think that you're right. Like it will all kind of end up there, but we're also seeing that they'll pull things. Like I think that's the thing. Like there's no guarantee that like even if you buy a digital copy of a movie, there's no there's no laws really guaranteeing that you can that this is yours and that they can't pull this or take this away. And I think that's why physical is starting to kind of make somewhat of a comeback. I wouldn't say it's lucrative like it once was, but I would say it's it's like a niche market that's starting the same way like the records started coming
Yeah.
out or out albums wow, I sound so old. I don't know what to
Oh
call
no,
it.
no, yeah, we still have we still have a bunch of albums we collect, but
Oh, really? Oh,
you're
wow.
you're you're right because essentially, if you go buy a movie on a platform, I know they say you own it, but you kind of have a license to watch it. I feel
That's
like
what you're buying. You're
anytime
buying a
you want.
license.
But if they ever lose the license or the rights, that platform to your area or territory, then yeah, it'll just disappear. All of a sudden, you don't have it. I'm sure it's
Yeah.
written somewhere in those disclaimers when you actually click purchase, which
Yeah.
I always felt like might be a little deceiving. Because let's say, for example, Netflix took over the rights of a particular property for the US, but it's only for 10, they have a 10-year deal. And at the end of the 10 years, let's say you would think that maybe, uh, the content owner, whoever, studios, whatever, would just renew the deal.
Yeah.
Maybe they're like, nah, don't want to do it anymore. Right. And then all of a sudden your stuff will disappear. So
We're
just
seeing that with video games as well. Like the rights, like you said, they get 10 years and then it goes away. Or, Grand Theft Auto, they license music for this amount of years and now they're coming back to re-release it and they don't want to go back to the table because now it's this huge game, where they gotta probably pay, Guns N' Roses. I don't know how much they want for it to be used in the game. So it's like I think now they'll be a little bit more cognizant of that, of like, this maybe if we don't do this, it'll roll over or something like that, as
yeah,
opposed to just letting it just like cancel and that we got to go back to the table and be like, okay, how much do you want for this? How much do you want this
yeah.
just to do the re-release?
Yeah. It's funny you say albums because the other day I literally had this thought. You know what? I woke up. I'm gonna go and find the albums to all the scores of all the films I like, plus whatever else Hans Zimmer has out there because I like all his work.
Yeah.
And just to have them,
Yeah.
I just want to like have
Oh,
want to be
the physical
yeah
copy.
the physical
Oh,
copies, yeah,
wow. Okay.
not just have it on digital music space. I actually want the physical
Yeah.
copies, right?
Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.